Jody, I'm your husband. Why don't you tell us how your last month was? There you go. Yeah, we were in swear to God. Room for one more.
I haven't seen the exhibition for a while.
Oh. Hey there, how are you?
I think Chloe was saying hi to us.
I will say hi to you. How are you?
Hi, hi Chloe. We're fine.
No,
Jolly good.
No.
Sitting
How are you?
in the hotel room.
Oh, bless you.
You'll have to on video us as well.
Hi, Chloe.
How are you, Chloe? Long time no see.
I know, Caroline, yes. Are you well?
I'm very well, thank you very much.
Jolly good, jolly good. You're looking well. Yeah. Hi, Lisa, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah. Yeah,
Great.
all good.
I said to you that I'll drop in just to ensure that you all start off smoothly without any tech glitches.
Yeah,
just
we
here for the
should be
beginning.
okay. Yeah.
Are you okay with screen sharing and everything? You have access to
Yeah,
it?
it should be. I'm hoping I can share my screen so that you guys can see the full kind of presentation, and then but I can still see my notes. So you'll have to bear with me because that bit but if needs be, I'll just not use the notes, just go through the presentation. That's fine.
Are the notes within the SharePoint, within the PowerPoint file?
Yes. Yeah.
And are you on the app version? Are you familiar with Teams and how?
Yeah. We use Teams a lot
okay,
anyway,
great.
so I should be okay.
Great.
I can have a little practice now. Do you know how many people are joining?
Good question. Let me just have a quick look at the registration.
Let me have a little play. So bear with me whilst I have a little. If I go.
Do we have?
Now we can make it so I can see.
Hey, if the hotel provides you with a bathrobe, shame not to use it.
Oh, you're in a hotel, are you?
Yes, we're in Iceland
Oh,
this week. Next week.
oh, very nice.
Um, Work, it's work.
I'm sure it is. How's that looking for you?
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah,
Makes
is that
sense.
okay? Super. Should be okay then in that case. I'll keep it up there, but jump back onto my notes.
I'm off so I can then go in
There
close
we go.
without meeting everybody.
Yeah.
And we've got about 20 people that have registered to join this call.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
Built environment, content built environment.
Yeah, we talk about sustainability.
Hi, Marcus. How are you?
Hello, Chloe. Nice to see you. How are you?
I'm very well. You're looking very relaxed there.
It's a bit misleading, this having, this kind of relaxing pillow in the back of my head, but
Yeah. Good. How's your new role going?
all right, quite busy. I was up at Cerbul today
Mhm.
because we're kicking off some new projects on sustainability,
Yeah.
and up in Kerbithor on Thursday. So I'm doing quite a bit of traveling at the moment and a lot of activities, but saying these exciting times, it's nice
Yeah.
to push change forward.
Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah. It's all good.
How about you? Everything all right?
It's brilliant. Yeah, really enjoying it, to be honest. Yeah, really, really good. Busy, as you'd expect. Yeah, had the pleasure of Milton Keynes this morning and then drove home today. But yeah, no, it's going really well. Really good.
And Gerand is still with you, or he retired?
He's handed his notice in. He is going to
Oh,
retire.
bless him.
Yeah, I know. It is about to. He has been threatening for a long time. So he's finishing in May. So I think he might possibly do Kerbithor and Sherburn as a last go, and then that's it. Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Go on.
You'll know Gerard, won't you? So
I know him. I don't know if
Yeah.
Caroline does.
he's just lovely. He's the nicest person ever. And he's going to be very difficult to replace. But yeah.
No, I'm fine. Thank
I don't know how many people. Hi, Lisa. I'm
Hi,
assuming
Marcus.
you might have visibility on how many people have registered.
Yes, about 20 registrations. So typically we get half of that turn up, sometimes a bit more, sometimes a bit less.
Okay.
Is you going to be joining this evening? He emailed me earlier just to ensure that I'll be coming along to make sure he doesn't have any issues joining. So now I'm worried that he's having tech issues.
I believe that he was planning to, and usually he, as a chair, introduces our
Okay.
kind speaker Chloe for taking the time, and just mentioned, just a bit about the brands and maybe an introduction to Chloe before Chloe starts.
He did. He said he was going to. So yeah, I sent him over a little piece just about kind of. I mean, it's on the screen now anyway, but he was just going to do a little introduction and stuff as well. So give him a few minutes. It's okay.
Over 20 years with BSI. What are you
I
like?
know. Honestly, it's terrifying, isn't
Sorry.
it? It's 22 this year, which is I don't know quite what happened. I don't think I'm old enough, but there you go.
You must be colouring your hair.
Well, it's definitely changed colour recently, put it that way. Yeah, it's a lot more salt and pepper than it was. But yeah,
I
it's
can't
been
see
good
it
though. I
from-
think because it's such a different, varied role. It's such a varied role that it's never been kind of boring and stale. That you're always learning things. So yeah, it's been really good. Loved it.
Well, we're still on the books, but only with the Iceland office.
do Iceland. Iceland would be nice. My daughter's after going there with school. They do a school trip over there. So we'll see. Yeah.
Lovely.
I think the furthest I've got for BSI is the Isle of Wight, which isn't quite as glamorous. Yeah.
I got
Isle of Wight looking at concrete wasn't, yeah.
It sounds, if you don't know and you haven't heard, it sounds very glamorous, you know, as a place. But I've never been, so I might don't do it justice. But I don't think it's as glamorous as it sounds.
I
where?
think it depends if you're working or going for a holiday, I think, doesn't it?
What, Iceland?
Or the Isle of Wight.
Oh, good to say Iceland's tremendous.
I'd say Iceland was a bit more glamorous than the Isle of Wight, definitely.
I don't know, the only time I've been to the Isle of Wight, it was with the military and we were doing a signals exercise. So we're all in Land Rovers driving all around.
Ah, yeah.
And that was a long time ago.
Yeah, we went as I was born on the south coast, and we went as kids a couple of times as little holidays. But yeah, no, tend to go the other way and go further north now. Yeah.
Well, I suggest we give you one more minute, and we can start at 7:05 if everyone is okay
Yeah.
with that.
Problem. That's absolutely fine. And do you usually get all sorts of different speakers on different standards and things as well?
We try to reach out to different industries, if you would like,
Mhm.
and have relevant topics. Recently, we talked about sustainability
Yeah.
in the steel industry, and some of that selection comes from feedback from the members.
Yeah.
Which might have some specific topics that they would like us to try to address or cover and raise awareness. Some of them are speakers who might be doing some relevant work, and they might have some information to share. But it's always a challenge because it's a voluntary, and we are grateful of your time. It can be challenging to attract people, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So if we have someone available and we did a similar topic, even if it won't be our preference, sometimes we end up doing that. But we are trying to bring a variety of people forward.
Yeah, it makes it more interesting, doesn't it, I suppose? Yeah.
And something else that we had a lot of feedback on is about helping people through their professional development to achieve chartership. I think a lot of people are not fully clear on how to get there and what they need to do.
Yeah.
So it's usually a topic of interest for many people.
Yeah, that's good. Should we get started, Lisa? If you's don't know if you're struggling or not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, let's make a start. I've tried to call him and I emailed him, but no, unfortunately, I haven't been able to
Not
get
to
through.
worry, it's fine. I'll do my own introduction. It's okay. So I suppose just to start off with, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about BS 99001. It's a really exciting standard. The team of people that I look after get very, very excited by it, and the few audits that we have done are kind of really, really interesting. So a very exciting standard for the construction industry. Overall, it should drive improvement, reduce risks, and help with the golden thread from the Building Safety Act as well. So that's kind of where it links in very heavily with the industry. You can kind of see on the slide kind of where I've come from and kind of what I do in BSI. But kind of in a nutshell, I've been at BSI for over 20 years, mostly doing audits over that time. So kind of started on the construction materials side of things, and then picked up kind of contractors, architects, engineers kind of along the way, and assessed more and more and more different schemes. So you can see on here, kind of started with 9,000, then picked up 14,001, picked up health and safety 18,001 at the time. Do some product certification audits, do BIM, the digital kind of construction side of things, and then some highway sector schemes as well. And then very beginning of last year, got the new role of the sector lead. So that person kind of manages the built environment sector team. So there's a team of 12 people-ish that kind of come and go across the UK, and they've got their own areas of expertise as well. So we've got a BIM specialist, we've got health and safety specialists, we've got civil engineers, someone that's very strong on product certification and things. So we're a focus group for BSI, kind of whether that's the auditor team or whether that's kind of the wider BSI as well. And we do all sorts of things. So mostly delivering audits, but also managing key accounts, improving schemes as well, and creating new schemes. So just as a little plug, there is a sustainable procurement standard which we're working on, and we're looking to kind of create a scheme for that. So that's the sort of thing that the team get involved with, as well as kind of being the go-to people when other auditors have got questions on built environment construction and things. We work very closely with other sector teams. So we've got a sustainability and a digital trust team, and there's a lot of crossover. So you'll start hearing kind of different standards popping in. PAS 2080, which is carbon and infrastructure. BIM, as I said, which links in a little bit to digital trust. And then we look at energy management, information security. So it's quite a nice place to be, because there's lots of new ideas, lots of new starters coming in with kind of fabulous kind of qualifications and knowledge and things, and it's all very exciting. It's really, really good. The built environment team of people that I manage are the only ones auditing this standard that we're talking about today. So the kind of, the specialists in that area, and we sort of pick up the best people for those audits as well. So that's kind of who I am and kind of what I do within BSI. BS 99001, I suppose, just to go through what we're going to cover today, is an overview of why the standard exists and kind of where it came from, key coverage of the standard. So I can go into quite a lot of detail over the kind of the clauses and things. So I kind of set out clause by clause what the differences are between 9,000. And I'm presuming most people have got a really good working knowledge of 9,000, so I'm not going to kind of cover the 9,000 requirements too much. And then I'll run through at the end the scheme requirements, so how we would manage clients with 99001, and just a few things to be aware of. Hopefully at the end of it you get a good idea of what the standard is, what it stands for, kind of how you might make that work with kind of either your own business or with your clients or colleagues and things like that. If you've got questions kind of throughout, you can put them in the chat. I don't know if I can see them because I'm only working off one screen, but maybe just if you pop them on the chat, I'll flip between the two, and we can have a little discussion if anyone's got particular questions as we go through, rather than necessarily leaving them till the end. And I think that's it, to be honest. So we get started. So the purpose and the kind of the reason that 99001 came about was there was a group of mainly tier 1 contractors, so the kind of the very, very large contractors, the BAM Cares of this world, kind of came together and highlighted an issue with quality kind of across the industry as a whole. Generally, it's seen as a bit of a poorer cousin to health and safety and cost management, maybe, and then maybe environment, and then poor old quality at the bottom. 9,001 is great, but it doesn't drive necessarily the right things for this particular industry. The industry's got a lot of challenges over the complex nature of how things work. So we tend to focus very much on the contractors for 99001. Other people do come in, but mainly it's the contractors. And obviously every day as sites progress, there's different challenges, different quality challenges, different material challenges, different subcontractors, constantly changing kind of environment that they're managing, and it was just felt that 9,000 didn't really reflect that very well. And the other thing really was that for the most part, clients, certainly the BSI see, want lots of integration across all the systems and kind of different standards that they're using as well. So it's trying to, it does pull together some health and safety and sustainability and digital design into the standard as well. So it's very construction based, if you like, very, very sector specific. So that was kind of the reason behind it. It also fell, I suppose, just after Grenfell, and the outputs of that is to kind of, we really need something that manages the quality of particular materials and kind of installation as we go through. So there's kind of a number of reasons why the standard kind of got put together. The standard itself is based on 9001. So if you get a chance to download it, you can download a version that is all the clauses of 9001 with additional 99,001s kind of after, if you like, similar to a sector scheme if you get involved in sector schemes. Very, very specific to the construction industry. It's a requirement standard, so when we're auditing against it, it is very black and white of you will do this or not. So nice and easy to audit as far as kind of we're concerned, but also relatively easy for somebody to go, this is why I need to do it, and it's quite clear as you're reading through exactly what you need to do within the standard. The standards kind of set around, for the most part, every stakeholder in the construction process. As I said, it does tend to lean a lot more to the contractors than it does kind of the designers and engineers and things, but the idea behind it was that it gave almost a whole overview project from start to finish with everybody that gets involved kind of throughout as well. So we're getting a lot of interest from contractors, but also kind of multidisciplinaries where you've got structural civil engineers and architects and things as well. So kind of everybody, and it's relevant really throughout the whole supply chain as well. So it is, if you're kind of looking at it as something that you'd want to implement, it's relevant kind of for all your suppliers and subcontractors and everybody involved. Lovely. The very sort of high level aspects of the standard, before we go into the sort of the detail, if you like. So the idea is that it really raises quality to a higher level than it is at the moment, and kind of brings it hopefully in line with particularly health and safety, but also that golden thread of information from the Building Safety Act and sustainability as well. So the idea, you know, kind of written into the standard is a new role for somebody in quality that's got that clout, if you like, to stop works if things are wrong. And it's never really had that before. That doesn't jump out as much in 9000. It gives more, I suppose, brand reputation if you've got it. So hopefully clients are starting to understand that it's that people have chosen it for the right reasons, and they have got a much more robust quality system in place. It talks a lot about how you identify, kind of particularly for context and risks and opportunities, the projects that you're working on, and it's kind of set around managing a project and kind of planning and delivering that project, rather than 9000, which is, it kind of stemmed obviously from manufacturing, so it's a slightly different flavour. So it kind of fits a lot better in that respect. It talks some more about very construction specific areas such as temporary works, inspection and test plans, design quality and things like that. It was written by the industry for the industry, so there's lots of people read it and it's quite detailed as you go through, but it's all kind of relevant and it makes sense, and there's nothing in there that when you read it you go, why on earth is that in there? Like it makes perfect sense for the industry, which is fantastic. And it talks a lot about right first time and planning and getting things right so that you don't end up with defects and non-conformities and kind of latent defects at the end of it as well. It does require a lot of collaboration. So it does talk more about collaborating with suppliers, collaborating with your supply chain as well, and getting the most out of everybody on a project. So ideally you would have kind of the main contractor with 99,000, but also kind of the other people in the supply chain so that it all works. And it's a lot more, I suppose the Plan Do Check Act is still there, but the lessons learned is quite a specific part of the standard as well. So that really jumps out, and the kind of continual improvement element is much more bumped up than it is in 9002. So yes, it's a good one, I would say. Any questions on sort of high level purpose of it at all, or happy for me to start on the clauses? No? Super. Okay. So what I've tried to do is just give you an overview of what the main differences are and the main additions from 9,000 up to meeting 99,000. I can't go through kind of every single word, but this should give you a really good understanding of the sort of things it starts to talk about. So as we go through clause 4, obviously it's set out exactly the same as 9,000. It starts talking about internal and external issues, and it talks a lot about current projects. So current projects you're working with, current clients you're working with, and also potentially future projects as well. So that you need to very much plan for, okay, well, say we work in healthcare, building hospitals, but we want to move into residential. You've got to start planning for that really upfront with the context side of things as well. It brings in, as I said, the other kind of sectors, if you like, and the other themes that are relevant. So information management, security for things like sort of digital trust. It talks about sustainability and net zero, and links very strongly through to the UN sustainability goals as well. It talks a little bit more about social value, so kind of using kind of local contractors and things, and then talks a lot about kind of labour shortages, material costs as examples. So they might not be relevant particularly for you, but kind of starts to teach you what the sort of specific things that you would be looking at. So quite a bit more defined, I suppose, and gives you quite specific things that you definitely need to consider. Interested parties is similar to 9,000, so it still talks about kind of identifying them, looking at their requirements and making sure you're planning to meet them, but also it kind of starts pointing you in the right direction again of the whole project team, project owners, you know, not just who's paying for the project. So if it was a school, you know, it's the local authority, but also who's going to use that building, and kind of making sure those people have got a really good understanding of how it's been built, what materials you've used, how to use things, how to set the boiler or whatever. It talks a lot about making sure people have got that information flow as they're going through. And also talks about social value, sustainability. Again, they kind of pop up as themes kind of throughout. And just see, I've made some notes, but I've waffled on, so I think bear with me. Sorry, scrolling on the wrong bit. Seeing if there's anything else to cover. Yeah, I think so. Any questions on clause 4 at all?
I have a quick question, Chloe.
Yeah.
Obviously, you talked about a set of standards, and there was an attempt to try to standardize the main frame between 9,001, 14,001, and 45,001. And this is, if you would like, is built on 9,001. Do you foresee this to be aligned with that frame? Because some of the topics on sustainability or so on, they're widely covered on 14,000. There are synergies between the standards.
There are. Yeah, there are a lot of synergies. Yeah. Yeah, it follows the same structure. So I suppose the clauses that we're going to go through should all be fairly familiar as per 9,000, as per 14 or 45. And there is quite a lot of crossover between 14 and 45, particularly, that start to come in. Although it's called quality in the built environment, it's still got quite a lot of those sort of sustainability, health and safety, particularly product safety and fire safety kind of throughout as well. So it matches up really nicely. We are trying, just as a little aside, to do an audit. The next audit that we're doing, we're kind of trialing can it work as a fully combined audit, and that'll kind of inform us as to whether it aligns really well, or actually does it need to kind of stay a little bit separate. So it's a bit of a trial. Yeah.
If you had an accreditation on, let's say, the 14,001 and the 9,001, and some elements on health and safety, I'm assuming, would you accept those as covered, or would you still revisit those?
We still visit them, because I suppose
Right.
within here, because it's talking about social value as well as sustainability, and I don't think I put it on that slide. It talks about net zero goals as well. So where it lines up with those UN goals, it kind of pulls out very specific things. So you might have 14,000, but you might not cover social value or net zero, but this standard does ask you to. So it's you can't just assume, oh, they've got 14,000, tick, that bit's done. We still went through, when we're doing the audits, we still go through almost line by line and make sure those bits are all covered. Later on, when I'm talking about the scheme, it's quite a confusing scheme to kind of plan for and kind of get the audit time planned correctly. And there is reductions we can make if people have 14 and 45, but we still need to be very mindful that we've got to cover the requirements in full for 99,000, which cross over a bit, but there is slight differences as well. Yeah.
Well, it makes sense. Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, that's all right. Any other questions on clause 4 at all? It's just you, Makis, being a troublemaker. Super. So clause 5 is where there starts to be a real difference in additional requirements from 9001. So there's a lot more accountability for top management. So obviously within 9001 that's already there, and within 14 and 45 it's already there. But it's quite specific in making sure that project management roles are represented by leadership, and quality is promoted at kind of all levels in the business and kind of across all operations. So it's really raising that profile of quality across the whole business, and particularly with the leadership team, and they are kind of ultimately accountable. They have to set a specific person, doesn't have to be one person, but people in place for very specific quality management roles. They've got to make sure that those people are competent. So particularly when it starts talking and linking through to the Building Safety Act, there's some PASs that align really nicely about competence for main contractors and competence for designers as well. And it starts to link through a lot more in being a bit more specific about what that competence actually means. Doesn't go into it in 99, but it links through to those PAS standards quite nicely. I'll say people, because it could be one or many people depending on the size of the business, that are given that responsibility for quality also need to be given the ability to do that role impartially and independently as well. So they're kind of very separate almost to, you're not just a project manager, you're not just running the business, you're not just a site manager, say, but you are a specific person looking after quality and really driving quality throughout the whole business. They need to make sure that projects have got defined responsibilities and accountabilities for quality, and they need to reflect the nature of each project as well. So if the projects are quite different, so you've got kind of, I don't know, they're building a huge great bridge or they're building a school or something, the complexity of that needs to be planned in with the people that are looking after it. So you can't just have a one size fits all across all the projects. You need to consider it on a risk-based kind of approach. There needs to be kind of reporting for quality up to leadership team as well. So quite specific on how that happens, and promotion of quality through the supply chain as well. So it's not just this one company will meet all these requirements, they need to start talking to the supply chain, getting them on board and kind of making sure that quality is set throughout that supply chain as well. Obviously, that's supposed to happen in 9000, but this is just more specific on making sure that that is communicated, and making sure that everybody understands the importance of getting quality right. They need to cover off product and service conformity. So similar sort of things to 9000. They need to think about and monitor on time and on budget delivery, because obviously that can affect quality as well. And then how they resolve any issues and learn from any lessons as well as they're going through. Just thinking what my next little bit is. The person that covers off, I suppose, that accountability of quality is called, it's kind of oversight of quality. That's the sort of tagline that they've given it. And that needs to be somebody in the leadership team as well. So leadership team, there is somebody absolutely responsible for quality as the oversight of quality person, and everything should feed through to them from the projects as to kind of progress and things. Just think if there's anything else I need to cover off for you. Yeah, one of the key, I suppose, key additions in a similar way to health and safety legislation is that that person with oversight for quality has the authority to pause operations, so they can stop operations on a site in theory if they need to, and make sure everything's in place to kind of correct things before they carry on working as well. So they need to, that's why they need to be given such a I suppose that independence, impartiality and that accountability, that they can walk onto site and go, that's incorrect, absolutely stop working till we've resolved it, rather than, I think probably a lot of times when we see things on site, certainly, and we ask about non-conformities or defects on a site, quite often things are resolved without anything actually happening. So this is generally built okay, but you rarely get kind of records of defects and records of what's gone wrong and what's been put right in the corrective action process behind it. They know it's gone right, but it's almost, yeah, just do it and then we'll think about it later. And then obviously they never get round to actually recording it. Whereas this is a lot more specific about making sure throughout everywhere, everybody knows exactly you can stop the work and that's it. And so quite a lot more, yeah, raising that profile of quality throughout. Any questions on clause 5 at all? No? Eclipse? No problem. Right. So clause 6. So again, it maps out beautifully to 9001. The risks and opportunities, so it asks you to look very much at current and future projects. So they need to think about the impact that the projects have on the organisation. They need to think about how they're going to manage those risks and opportunities and mitigate kind of any negative impacts at all. They need to think about how each construction is going to work. So if they're building very different types of buildings, if you're building a steel frame warehouse for Amazon and you're building a hospital, they're going to have very, very different risks. One could be live, one could not be live, like all sorts of things they need to consider. They need to consider a kind of a wider view as well. So the impact on society and kind of potential risks, and on the economy. And if contractual requirements change, how they're going to manage those as well. So to start thinking about, if the client wants additional work, how is that going to affect the project? How's that going to affect the quality? If they get extension of time, what's the impact maybe on the local community or something? It all needs to be kind of much better mapped out than maybe 9000 kind of really asks you to. If I suppose there's a risk on supply of goods, we'd kind of see that the delivery is planned better and there's kind of a backup if needs be. So if you were talking about certain cladding, it might be that well, we can't get that, it's not available, whatever, it's stuck on a boat somewhere. But they should have a backup in place in case that, so they're not then making the wrong decisions if something doesn't go as planned as well. So slightly different kind of focus on things as well. They need to consider how risks are controlled, where traceability, particularly of materials or something, or how something's been installed, is maintained when you can no longer get into that particular bit and see it. So much better kind of records, much better planning and kind of inspection and test plans as well. So the risks and opportunities bit really kind of starts to develop that plan for how we're going to deliver the project. Anything else as well? For risk opportunities, they have to write them down and do them all, obviously. Objectives, so there should be objectives kind of overall for the business, but also for each specific project, that reflects that project's risks and controls and kind of requirements as well. And then that's where more requirements for the social value side of things come in, and the economic and environmental commitments as well. So quite often with a project we're seeing, you know, if it's a local authority, they've got a lot of social value requirements, so you'd want that to be built into the objectives as well. And really starting to think about that individual project and how you're looking at cost and time and the whole project life cycle. So not just we've built it, lovely, thank you very much, we'll go and build the next one and forget about that one, but also, you know, how they're going to manage it and run it, and maybe at the end of its life start through its demolition, but think about the whole end-to-end kind of life cycle rather than purely just built it, off we go. It talks a little bit about getting interested parties involved in setting those objectives as well. So particularly where you've got, obviously client objectives will be in there, but relevant interested parties could be a local community, or it could be suppliers potentially, or subcontractors, and it should be part of the whole objectives, and those objectives obviously need monitoring kind of as we go through as well. Another part of clause 6, so the planning of changes, and kind of dotted throughout the rest of the standard, management of change kind of jumps out in a number of places. This kind of starts to set the scene as to how they're going to manage that as well. So if someone's going to change something on a project, make sure there's no conflict of interest with the management system or the organisation, other projects, kind of future projects, future use of that project. Making sure you've got agreement of all the parties if you're going to make change. So not just, yeah, the architect signed it off, brilliant, but everybody's kind of involved with that process, making sure everyone understands what the changes as well, and doing that loop back to risks and opportunities, and making sure, well, we've done a change or we're planning a change, has that changed any of the risks and opportunities? Has it changed anything that we need to manage or control on the project as well? So it's a lot more defined as to how you do each of these bits as well. So the client that we've kind of got at the moment, they've for the most part used their 9,000 system that they had already, and then they've bumped it up almost and put in lots of additional requirements. So they've got risks and opportunities. They do a combined one, but they've put in kind of very, very specific quality questions so that they pick up all of these requirements as well. And so far for them, it's worked really, really well. And that was, yeah, useful to see how they do that, I suppose. Any questions on clause 6 at all? No, all quiet. Okay.
We're still, we are still here, Chloe, don't worry.
It's fine, don't worry.
What does R and O mean in the last line?
Risks and opportunities.
Ah, well, thank you.
Yeah, that's all right, don't worry. That was me being, yeah, lazy. Yeah, so it's, yeah, if they're planning a change, they've got to go back and loop through to risks and opportunities and make sure that it's not changed anything, they've not added any additional risks or kind of altered an opportunity or something. That was what that one was. Thought I'd got rid of most of those little shorthand things, but no, obviously not. Super. Get over now. There we go. So clause 7 is, I think, relatively straightforward. So I'll kind of whiz through clause 7. Clause 8 is a bit of a monster. So we'll spend a lot more time on clause 8, and we've got various slides for clause 8. In a nutshell, clause 7 is very, very similar. It just asks for a couple of sort of very specific things. So the infrastructure element of clause 7 includes items like electronic platforms, communication systems, kind of utilities they're going to use, and local networks. So it's kind of modernized what the infrastructure element would be. They need to think about what the client and the end customer might want as far as infrastructure as well. They need to think about how it's going to be maintained. So whether it's off-site, on-site, physical, virtual, it kind of, the standard links through kind of a lot of different elements that probably if you were writing 9000 now, you'd probably add in, but didn't get a chance. It talks about promoting ethical behaviour. So as part of that organisational knowledge and lessons learnt part of it, it brings in promotion of ethical behaviour, social responsibility at all levels within the business and throughout the supply chain. So it's quite forward thinking in that respect. And they need to think about, it kind of gives you guidance from a number of other standards that link through on that. So the modern slavery standard, responsible procurement, data protection, anti-bribery, carbon footprint reduction, carbon and infrastructure that I mentioned earlier. So it kind of links you through to, it's not just a one little standalone, it's just quality. There's lots of other bits and bobs that kind of feed into it. So the standard kind of gives you guidance on that. You don't have to follow those ones, but it's just pointing you in the right direction, essentially. The monitoring and measuring element, won't be surprised to hear it's all about calibration, making sure that calibration across the supply chain is aligned as well. So the equipment is the right sort of equipment, everyone's using the right sort of thing, you've got that full traceability. Looking at specific equipment of where it is, its status, its verification. Have you got the records, not just for a calibration certificate, but if you've used it and it goes out of calibration, how do you then go back and make sure everything was okay? It talks about, I think this bit's kind of more in the infrastructure bit as well, temperature, heat, humidity, sunlight and things, of those environmental conditions that can affect calibration as well. So it's quite, specific. There's a lot of words in that standard. And competence requirements. So as part of the bottom one on here, a lot stronger links to product safety as well. So making sure people that are working either within the company or in the supply chain as well, that they have that authority to stop things if they need, and they've got all the right processes, they've got the right design, they've got the right inspection and test information, and they're competent to make those approvals, if you like, for that role. I didn't put them in here, but so the other PASs that I'll mention are PAS 8671 and 8672. So that was the contractor competence and the designer's competence. And they kind of set a scene of, this is how you can manage competence throughout the business, specifically for construction companies. So that if you have got clients that are looking at 99001, those ones are also really worth a look at, just to make sure they've got kind of a consistent approach that meets the requirements for competence. They talk a lot about competence for product safety and that traceability of product safety as well. So it's not relying on someone going, it's fine, I'll just tick a box, I can see it's gone in. They've actually genuinely understood that product's gone into that place, it's installed correctly, and there is that full record of where everything's gone as well. There's a part on lessons learnt. So for any of the projects kind of at any stage, they can have lessons learned, and they're kind of going through and improving as they go. But also they will have to link through to that risks and opportunities process. So you might learn a lesson on one project, but actually doing something on that project might cause another risk on a different one. So it's quite a loopy standard, if you like. Sorry, jumped over that one. And lots more on communication, particularly through the supply chain as well. So making sure that if you've got kind of a tier 1 contractor, all their contractors that sit below them have all got the information they absolutely need to get that right first time quality, understand that product safety kind of thread, if you like, and make sure that all of the inspections, installations and everything is all as planned. So there's no kind of excuse for I didn't know, I had the wrong version, that kind of thing. It's very specific in giving that information and making sure it's up to date kind of throughout. Any questions on clause 7? Happy? Yeah.
How do you manage traceability on a pile of sand or a heap of pebbles?
So that's an interesting one, actually. We would particularly look at, I suppose, the specification of that gravel or type 1 or whatever it is. We'd look at how it got specified. Is it the right material for that location and for that job? And then we would look at kind of delivery tickets and things like that. But as part of that, either the design of that material or the use of that material, we'd probably expect there to be test results of either the strength of it, the size of it, the chemical makeup of it, or the geological makeup of it. It depends a lot on the risk of what that is. So if it's I suppose just gravel around a drainage unit or something, it's not providing any structural integrity. It is just a little bit of drainage. That's fine. We'd probably look for something slightly different than if it was a piling mat or something like that, where you need a certain strength within the aggregate, say, and would expect clients to have identified that kind of through that risks and opportunities process and through the planning process within the next clauses as well. So we're never going to be the experts on every single thing they're ever going to install, but they should be, and they should be able to demonstrate that they've got that traceability. There is it's kind of like a software product that BSI recently launched called BSI Identify, and that very much actually gives things a tag. So if you were talking about kind of the structural steel or timber or plaster or something like that, you can almost tag it and you can see, I suppose, the history and the data sheets and everything kind of throughout. So if anything changes, you almost log on to a big database and it tells you, oh, that's this information, and it keeps it all up to date. Did not explain that very well, but I think there will be a time when we can tag things kind of live and digitally, and you can see them in the models a lot better than now, where you are relying on the supplier's delivery ticket. So, yeah, did that make sense?
Well, I can see you can get in a test certificate with the structural steel, but I can't see you getting a test certificate with a pile of sand or a heap of pebbles.
You can do. So, I mean, certainly for sand, we see that they have like a grading analysis, so you can see it's the right size. They would usually have a petrographic analysis as well. So is it the right kind? Is it a silica sand? Is it a flint? Is it a chalk or something? So we can usually get to the bottom of it if we needed to. So if it was a high risk thing, then we can usually get to the bottom of it, and they would provide, I think they're called California bearing ratios of the strength, like if you were rolling it to make a piling mat, then it gives you that confidence that it is the right material and it is compacted to the right amount as well. So they would be able to test that sort of thing. So it sort of depends on what you're using it for, to be honest. Yeah, there'd usually be something, that we could get that shows it is the right product and used in the right kind of way. If it is just sand and it's there just to literally just fill a hole, then it's less important. But if that hole's needed for stability, someone's going to drive on it afterwards, there'll be tests throughout to make sure it is compacted to the right amount and built up to the right levels as well. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, super. Right, so clause 8, as I said, it's a meaty one. Broken down exactly the same as 9,000. And if you do, I don't know if I said it earlier, if you do download the standard, download the PD version. There'll be 2 different type versions you can download. One of them is purely just 99,000. The PD version will have the 9,000 requirements and then the 99,000 after it, and that's a really useful one because it's just easy to just have the one document, but it's got kind of both in there. So yeah, that's my hint and tip. So clause 1 is kind of about the planning element of it, and it's making sure that the company have sort of planned the construction of the construction of the project as best as they can, taking into account all of these different elements as well, so that they have thought about, is it sustainable? Does it link in through to the sustainability commitments? Is there a social value requirement? Are we going to have that throughout the project and potentially afterwards as well? Have we planned how all the different elements are going to be manufactured? So if they've got off-site manufacturing or on-site kind of installation, if you like, is that the best way of doing things? Is that going to reduce the risk of quality? They should plan. So I suppose going back to the SAM question, what certificates do they need? What sort of accreditations do they need from their supply chain? They need to think about how easily they can inspect things, service things, maintain things as well. So not just how easy is it and how cheap is it to install, but how on earth are we going to look after it afterwards? Because that's a huge part of either product quality or person risk as well. They need to consider how reliable those components that they're going to fit are. So there's no point, again, fitting something cheap if you know it's going to break down in 2 years' time when the life of the building is, 30 years plus, because it adds in another element of the wrong thing gets fitted again and then it gives issues. They need to think about obsolescence of either software or parts or kind of, I suppose, boiler or plant or something like that, and make sure that they are planning for all of the different elements to be maintainable for the length of that building, if you like. So usually sort of 30 years or so, which sounds really short, but planning for the whole life costs, not just building it as cheaply as possible. They need to plan how they're going to hand over, how they're going to give all that information to the end user as well, and then disassembling and decommissioning and demolishing it at the end of the day, and making sure that as they're doing that, it is as reusable or recyclable as possible. So quite a lot of sustainability bits kind of pop out in that one as well. It needs to link, so all of these bits here kind of link back to that risks and opportunities as well. So making sure that the risk of the incorrect item or the incorrect installation is all planned for. If they need specialists, have they planned for specialists and things as well? What else have we got on that one?
Can I ask a quick question, Chloe?
Of course you can.
Again.
Yeah.
Do you see any influence coming from the HICIT report on the product safety and compliance? Because this links with 9001.
Yeah.
So you talk a lot about installation guidelines and traceability and all these things. I'm assuming some of those learnings will be coming into this standard as well.
Yeah, we do. So one of the pieces of work that we've got planned for this year is looking at 99,000 and the Building Safety Act and the Hackett report in a lot of detail, and almost as much as we can do, mapping where the standard meets that Building Safety Act, and kind of going, if you have the standard, it's not going to give you a massive tick for the Building Safety Act, but it will tick off an awful lot of clauses. So that's a piece of work we've still got to do. What we are doing is looking at things like the Common Assessment Standard for when people are procuring particularly contractors, and sort of saying, you know, if you had 99,000, actually that would meet an awful lot of the newer questions that are coming through with fire safety and product safety as well. So there's kind of a, I suppose, a wider picture that's, we're not going to fix it kind of this week, but it's making sure that the standard aligns with what the industry wants and any changes in the industry as well. Yeah, but it comes up a lot. I mean, it's one of the I suppose the biggest risks in the industry at the moment is not being able to demonstrate that you're meeting that. It's one of the main drivers for 99,000, and it's one of the main drivers for those other two PASs that I mentioned as well. And I think there's a huge spotlight on it at the moment, and it's everyone's trying to get it right, but they're still learning, I suppose. Yeah, and it's a whole culture shift as well. It's going to take a while to almost switch over from the cost element of it as being kind of one of the biggest things that's a driver to the quality is. So there's a lot of work to do, I would say. Yeah. Okay. I think 8.1 also covers, I didn't open up the standard, to be honest. I think it also covers, again, change management and how they're going to manage change as well. So planning for change kind of on a more project by project basis for this clause. 8.2, testing myself on the standard now, covers over, so it brings in more of that fire and structural safety requirements, brings in digital capability. So I suppose clients are finding a lot more, they're using BIM a lot more. There's still a bit of a lag in competence of using some of those digital tools kind of throughout the whole supply chain. There's kind of absolutely brilliant bits, and then some people are still very much on bits of paper and they see digital as it's a Word document, not true digital. They need to think about kind of timeframes, information security as well starts to come in. So links through to a lot to 27,000 in what are you providing, you know, who can see the information, who can see the design, who can see what you've installed. Again, looking at all of the life cycle. So ideally people are planning kind of quality right from that very, very early, almost bid stage, through to pre-construction planning, actual construction, handover to the client or kind of end user, aftercare and decommissioning. And they need to plan for all of that, not just we've built it, it's done. And then they need to think about kind of potentially changing the building as well. So, you know, if it's a car park, might you add extra layers? Can you build that into kind of the initial design? And how you're going to build it? Is it easy to build? If you make, you know, if you kind of, it looks gorgeous on a bit of paper, but actually when you go to build it, is it a nightmare? And they need to plan for all of those things and plan the quality kind of throughout every single one of those. It also asks for kind of like your own pestle analysis for that project as well. So it's starting to kind of almost, that project becomes a management system in its own right. Not quite, but that's kind of how they're starting to see it. Bits. I think the other bit that jumps into there as well is planning for any changes to statutory and regulatory requirements. So you might not know what's coming, but you'll have to have a process for how you identify new things like that. And if it is foreseeable and you know it's definitely going to change, so some of the building regulations kind of, you know, they're going to change, that you get kind of, it's well advertised, you need to start planning for that and making sure that it's built into that particular project. And then there's the usual kind of bits of communicating with the relevant interested parties and building that into the project planning process as well. The next one, not a surprise, change management. As I say, it pops up a number of places within the standard. So they need to plan very carefully on who can request a change, who can make the change, who can authorize the change, their competence and kind of authority. So it's not just an automatic kind of thing of, yeah, we're going to change from red to blue, but there is a full process of looking at the risks involved as well. Roles and responsibilities should be set out, should be documented. Levels of authority for sign off and things as well. And then a lot more about how they document it, how they record it, and traceability of changes as well, so that you can't just change from one material to another because it's a bit cheaper. You've got to go through that full process and make sure it doesn't bring in any additional risks as well.
Someone has their hand raised. Is it?
Oh,
Sue?
do they? Sorry, I can't. Yeah, you have to just shout out.
No, it's
Who's
okay.
got their hand raised?
Hiya,
hi.
it's Sue. When I've looked at this standard, particularly on the design side, and I may be wrong because I haven't got it in front of me, I'm just remembering, it seems to say you shall consider. So when you're
Yeah.
auditing, do we just show that we've considered, or do we have to do? Because there's a hell of a lot in there that
There is,
people
yeah.
are going to say, well, the client is going to pay for that.
When we did the audit, the first audit that we did, the very beginning of last year, we asked that they demonstrated that they'd communicated, that consideration, I suppose. They can't force people to do it. But we asked that they kind of recorded going back to the client or the end user or whoever and saying, have you thought about this, this and this, so that they could show they've considered it. But obviously they can't make them do it, to be honest. So it is, I think as people get more and more used to it, that would be built into either the management system or that project process. And hopefully everyone will have it and it'll be amazing and everyone will consider it. But at the moment we were relying very much on almost emails or meeting minutes or something like that, just to show that they'd raised it with clients. And that's as much as they could do. Yeah, can't make them do it at the moment, unfortunately.
One thing that I was looking at is if they'd sort of done a design risk assessment and this was part of the checklist for the design risk assessment.
Yeah.
That would do. Yeah.
Yeah, that would work. Yeah, part of the design review or the risk assessment review, definitely. Yeah. It's not too it's not too prescriptive as to when or how they do it, but yeah, it's being able to demonstrate that they've considered it is, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. So I don't know if that was Caroline or Sue, sorry, because I can't see your face, you're sat in the middle. But 8.3 it's all right. 8.3, same sort of setup as in 9000, but it brings in again that full life cycle. It's a lot of themes as it goes through. Brings in a lot more for product safety, brings in obsolescence, brings in product safety and kind of fire safety as well, and then feedback on similar solutions. So if you've used something it's been really successful in one project, right, let's feedback, let's put it on another project as well. So it might be quite a different project, but looking at does it work and doing that lessons learned as well. Outputs, obviously there's all the change management and authorized person kind of signing off design at the right point in time, at the right level. That jumps out an awful lot as well. Something else. There's more in planning the design as well. So who's going to do the tasks? Have they got the resources to do the tasks so it's not kind of rushed and things are missed? Looking at more responsibilities and authorities. So we'd probably expect some sort of racing matrix as they were going through the planning of design and doing the design as well. As they're going through the design, looking at how they verify, test, validate, maintain kind of certain bits of equipment or certain materials, and thinking about that design maturity and how novel or how new that design is. So I suppose if they're building Amazon warehouses and they are essentially the same every single time, that bit's relatively straightforward. But if you've got an architect who's designed something that's absolutely fantastically gorgeous, there's going to come an awful lot more risk, and they need to think about how they're actually going to build it, and sign off and verification is going to be a lot different to the same thing kind of checked out a number of times. Yeah, design review again goes through interested parties as well. So it's not just necessarily an internal, yeah, we've done a design review, here's a little checklist, off we go. They need to include interested parties, they need to include statutory and regulatory requirements, and they need to include that supply chain as well, particularly if that supply chain are doing elements of the design. It all needs to join up into one, rather than sometimes at the moment it's quite separate, discrete parts of design that don't always talk to each other. That's most of it to design. Any questions on design again? Okay. It's 8.4, should have put the 4 on. Again, it goes into a lot of detail about external providers, as we've talked about already. That supply chain of either products or subcontractors that are going to do installation, construction, off-site manufacturing things, they all need to match up, and all the quality kind of end to end all needs to be considered as well. So they need to think about more detail of evaluating those providers. So 9,000 obviously asks you to evaluate them. This goes into a bit more detail about kind of competencies. How are you going to plan inspection and testing? How are you going to do a recall if there's a recall of a product that's already been built into something? How are you going to delegate things as well and still maintain that competence kind of throughout? How are you going to make sure that inspection and test reports remain valid kind of throughout, and then ongoing into handover as well? So there's a lot more requirements, rather than, I suppose at the moment it can be quite a light touch depending on who the client is, but this kind of sets out a lot more defined areas of, actually we want you to really focus on these bits. They need to think a lot more about what happens if someone doesn't meet requirements as well. So a lot more planning for what ifs kind of jumps in as well as part of this one. Or if, you know, if they've asked for a certificate to be part of their evaluation, halfway through that project, the certificate expires. Now what do you do? So they've got to go into a lot more detail than just, yeah, I don't know, they've got, say, SSIP tick. It goes into way more detail. And also planning for if they plan to use a subcontractor, but that subcontractor can no longer do it and they're going to bring in someone else, or they're going to sublet something. How are you going to maintain that focus on quality, product safety and fire safety as well? That's it for those ones. And then the actual delivery, so they're actually doing, planned it over for the now, off they go. Obviously they need to do the inspection test plans and things. They are going into a lot more detail. We're seeing when people have got 99,000, tending to be a lot more digital as well. So there's more systems out there to kind of either geotag it as you're kind of doing an inspection or a test, or monitor the progress of any defects or snags that you found as well. Generally a lot more digital, not all the time, but looking at workmanship. So quite often I think in the standard it sets out, you know, are you going to do a mock-up? Are you going to give them an example? How are you going to make sure that that workmanship's kind of correct all the way throughout the build as well? How do you maintain accountability through the supply chain as people are sublet? And then post delivery as well, looking at analysing data. So there's quite a big chunk of, I think it's on clause 9, of this is the sort of data you should be collecting, making sure that all the information you're passing on to the end user or the client is accurate, it's correct, it's not based on what you thought you were going to install, it is based on what you actually did install. Making sure that that information is always live as well, so they've always got access to it. And thinking goes back to that design risk assessment as well, but safe maintenance and safe operation of that part or that building or that room or something like that, and making sure that people can do all these things. They're not dangling off the roof or something, that you considered how people are going to access things, maintain things, and changes again as well. So making sure that as you are, or during that project, that you are controlling changes, because there will always be changes. It's one of the main things of being in construction, and that's one of the issues as to why they wrote the standard, but making sure that that design intention and the specification and the requirements are met throughout, even if there are changes in personnel or providers or suppliers or something like that. And then notifying changes to everybody that needs to be, including the customer or the end user as well, to make sure that everyone's aware of this is why it's changed, this is what's changed, and this is the implication too. So it kind of goes through a lot of detail. Any questions on clause 8 at all? Quiet, jumped a bit, sorry. So clause 9, as I say, it goes through a bit more detail on what you should be monitoring and measuring. So monitoring, measuring those implementation of plans, the inspection test plans, monitoring and measuring products and services from external providers, monitoring and measuring competence of people throughout the supply chain as well. Looking at schedules, have they been met? Have budgets been met? Have changes been met? Has project performed as planned? It kind of goes into quite a lot of detail about what you should be monitoring for the project, and that all starts to link through to the lessons learned part as well in clause 10. It asks you to consider kind of KPIs as well. So again, it might be different project to project, will have different KPIs, but consider KPIs to make sure that you've got all of that information kind of monitored as you go through as well. Making sure you actually use that data. So you do analyse it, you do evaluate it, and you use it in either a management review, or you use it as a lessons learned, or you use it as a monthly project review or something like that. So quite a lot more on the performance measures. Internal audit, not too different, to be honest. You audit against this standard, as well as 9000. Should be risk-based, so if you've got a very complex project, that should have more audits than something that's really simple. Making sure that that audit also meets the interested parties' needs and expectations as well, and starts to kind of pull in either, if suppliers have got requirements, or the client or stakeholder, or the person actually paying for it, or the insurers. All of those requirements should be part of the internal audit as well. The results of that audit should be communicated to interested parties, if relevant, depending on who they are. And then you also need to consider auditor competence as well. So because the standard goes into a lot more detail about things like change management, product safety, fire safety, you need an auditor that's got more knowledge on those kind of topics than maybe someone that's purely 9000. The company that we audited at the very beginning used a sort of a team approach for that as well. So they had someone that was very strong on 9000 that understood the processes for 99 really well, but they also had someone on the team that had that product safety, fire safety knowledge as well. So they kind of teamed up so that overall the audit team had the competence. It's quite a tricky ask for someone to have everything. And then management review, fairly similar, to be honest. So same sort of setup, but looking at that interface with interested parties, making sure that their wants and needs are included more, and communicating back out to them if that's relevant as well. Taking into account that social value, economic and sort of sustainability commitments as well. So it just has a few more requirements kind of dotted into that management review. The review should be part of the ongoing reporting and evaluation. So they don't want it as a very separate, right, at the end of the year, let's do a management review. which 9,000 is absolutely fine for. This one, it kind of asks it to be a bit more combined into the general management of the business. It's not too specific in how you do it, but that's kind of where it's leading you almost. Those bits. Any questions on clause 9 at all? No? Generally making sense? Yeah. Good. Super. And then clause 10, again, relatively familiar. Looking at lessons learnt over the project, looking at improvement over the full life cycle of the project as well, looking at sustainability commitments. Told you things will pop up again and again and again, and talking and engaging with interested parties as well, so that it's not just that one company that's looking at the lessons learned and the improvement. You're doing it as a full project team almost, which a lot of people do anyway. It's just difficult, I think, sometimes once something's built and handed over, to get everybody together again. So some people have been looking at almost regular catch-ups for improvement as a specific meeting whilst everyone's still very much engaged in that project. Non-conformities generally managed the same sort of way. There is a difference in the standard between here's a management system non-conformity and here's a project or kind of construction based issue as well. So it asks that you make sure that people understand the difference between those two things, and if needs be you might have separate processes or procedures for those, because they need and want slightly different things as well. It's just a slightly different little bit on those ones, and that needs to go throughout the supply chain so that they understand, oh, I've installed it incorrectly, is it a project or is it a process kind of issue that they're talking about. But same sort of thing with root cause and kind of actions and making sure things are timely as well. They're all the same. So that's kind of the standard in a nutshell. I've not covered every single line of the standard, but it should give you a nice flavour of how it works and the main themes. So themes are very much that golden thread of information and planning and change management, product and fire safety as you go through, and competence. Any questions generally on the standard?
First of all, can I apologise for being late in plugging into this system?
Yeah.
Because my fat finger syndrome and digital incompetence are legendary. It's a very wide-ranging standard, and I can only see it being applied by large projects. I can't see my local builder being interested in it. One thing I couldn't quite get at was there's a very large housing development taking place about 2 miles away from where I live in the South Yorkshire Pennines, and it seems to be absolute chaos. And they're already finding, with about a quarter of the houses built, that the actual water supply into the place isn't very good. And you know, it's this sort of thing that perhaps this standard, if it's followed by the major contractors, will avoid. But it's one of these things. Nobody has a good view of modern building. Right, because in a recent development, that to replace all the houses, all the roofs after 6 months. Yeah. So there's something really needed in that industry.
I'd like to think it would, to be honest. So something like the water supply or the electricity supply or something, anything like that, should come out as part of those risks, to be honest. Yes, it should be something they're planning for, and it should be considered. That's
what I'm saying, that if people can follow a standard like this, it is very wide ranging. It's covering design and structural integrity as well as quality assurance. But it's probably, having what I've seen of this sort of industry, it's going to be a big shock to them if it gets enforced.
Yeah, I think one of the, I suppose the questions that we're kind of getting is, will it be enforced kind of throughout the supply chain? So if one of the tier 1 contractors have got it, does that automatically mean everybody else in that supply chain's got to have it? Hopefully for BSI it will be a yes, but it's not necessarily relevant, depends on what they're doing. I would say, I suppose, local builder kind of level, they might not want to get it audited by BSI or whoever. I'd like to think that if they read it and kind of understood the sort of purpose of it, of why people put it together in the first place, that was still relevant. They could still pick out certain things where they go, oh, actually, do you know what, that would be really useful to have that product quality kind of planned a lot better, and have someone that's accountable and have that person that can stop it at that level. They might not go to the nth degree, but I would like to think it is relevant still.
The
They might just
chances
pick out
are that
little
the
bits,
local
yeah.
builder has no idea that it exists, though.
Probably not, to be honest. It's been it's for us, it's been quite a soft launch, and it's almost a let's test the water and see how it's going. So we've not kind of gone, bam, here's a here's a new standard, isn't it fantastic? We've done a bit of a softer launch. I think if they if they kind of read it and understood, I suppose it depends whether they read a standard or not, because there is an art in reading a standard to someone that's never read a standard. But if they had guidance on this is what it's trying to tell you to do, then I think it would be useful, just for things for them to consider, if nothing else. Yeah.
I suppose for main developers or big builders, this is great because it's not just a differentiation standard.
Yeah.
It helps them close problems and gaps if they have these structures in place.
Yeah.
So it will be quite useful to them. But for smaller, let's say, developers, there is a very big, and thank you, Chloe, that was extensive, a lot of information.
No, I just gave you some free training, Makis. I'll get told
That's
off.
very kind of you, thank you. That's it's quite a lot of scope. So for little developers, I can see this being daunting if you have very little resource to try to implement, and that's maybe something that can be a challenge.
Yeah, it absolutely could be, and I think there is a big difference in, or we see a big difference in who people are building for. So if you're building for the government or local authority or somebody like that, kind of public money, there is a much more of a understanding of the sort of things that this is asking you to do, the social value side or sustainability or kind of having that traceability. That's absolutely there. Housing developers, smaller builders, probably less so, to be honest. It would be lovely if they did understand it and they kind of got it and it was being asked, but it's not going to be asked all the time, particularly if it's a private housing developer, I suppose, that their main focus isn't necessarily what this is asking you for, in the nicest ways. So yeah, but
is it actually aimed at designers or architects or developers?
It's aimed more at the contractors, I would say, so the actual construction companies. So we've had a bit of a debate in BSI as to, is it relevant for architects, designers, engineers, M&E designers and things like that? In theory, if they're part of that full supply chain, then it absolutely can be, but maybe not all of the clauses, and you can exclude certain clauses if they're not relevant. But overall, the people that were involved in writing the standard and then helped BSI write the scheme, which I'll come on to in a minute, they were very much those main contractors in the tier 1 level. So it is generally aimed at them slightly more. I think other people would have to pick out the bits that were kind of relevant and useful for them. We are looking at getting the scheme together and kind of altering it a little bit because we are getting a lot of interest from the designers. But really it was used for the people actually contracting and construction. That's the focus, really.
Nancy has her hand raised, and thank you for joining.
Yeah. I just wondered whether you could share who had been involved.
Yes, I think I might be able to. Give me a minute because I've got a little bit on how we did the scheme, and if not, I can jump into another. I've got something on my computer I can dig out and find out the names. Yeah.
Perfect.
Any questions on the standard, and then I'll jump into kind of the other bits that link in as well. No. If there's a hand raised, someone will have to shout because I can't see you. So, as I mentioned before, there is these 3 standards. So the 8670 kind of gives an overall overview of competence, if you like. And this links very much back to the Hackett report. And then there's 8671 and 8672. So it's setting a process in place for competence of principal contractors and principal designers. We have had some interest in, can we audit this? We absolutely can. There isn't a scheme at the moment, so it would be through our kind of internal audit and supplier audit process, which is a slightly different thing. So it's not accredited, it doesn't fall under the same rules. And we've got to be very careful about impartiality if it crosses over with 9000 and things. But if you have people that are interested in particularly the competence side of things for construction, these are absolutely brilliant because it does set out that this is how you could manage it process. So popped those in there anyway, just for your reference. The BSI scheme, let me just have a quick whiz through it. No, I don't think I did. So the BSI scheme, let me find, I've got another presentation somewhere, I think, with maybe that one, with the names of the people that were involved. So it was driven very much by a chap who used to work at Mace, John Adshed. Now, before we changed our website, there was a really useful webinar that he did with us on quality in the built environment that came out just before the standard came out. And he was a real driving force in getting the standard written in the first place. So Mace were kind of heavily involved in writing the standard and in the scheme as well. The other people that were involved were Kia, CBRE, Morgan Sindall, Volker, MCOR, BAM and Eurovia. I think there might have been a couple of others that sort of dipped in and out a little bit. So very much those tier 1 contractors, but quite a mix of people doing kind of highways, buildings. Volker do a lot of like flood alleviation schemes and things like that, kind of really heavy civil engineering. So quite a nice cross section, but generally speaking, all contractors. So that's why it's kind of aimed more at them. And the scheme that we put together is very much aimed at them at the moment, which hopefully we're looking to change. There's a few kind of little quirks with the 99,000 scheme that BSI offer. So if somebody wants auditing against 99,000, they absolutely have to have 9001 with a UCAS accredited company. Doesn't have to be us, but it has to be someone. And we would have to have visibility of that certificate. The scopes have to match, so we can't cover a slightly different scope for 99,000 as we would for 9. They absolutely have to be the same. And it's not an accredited scheme at the moment for 99,000. So what BSI tend to do is we'll put something out there for a requirement standard. Here's a scheme, and we kind of test it in the market. We have clients and they're kind of using it. And then as and when, if there's a need, then we get it UCAS accredited. This one isn't at the moment, but it very much is, it's got the same sort of manual for doing the scheme, same sort of procedures, same sort of controls that we've got in place. So all the controls that BSI would usually have as far as competency of auditors, competency of salespeople, doing all of the independent reviews before we issue a certificate, that's exactly the same as 9,000. It's just that UCAS don't cover it. The way that we calculate the audit durations is slightly different. So usually BSI base it on kind of the effective number of staff, and that's fairly straightforward usually. For this scheme, we look at number of staff as a kind of a guide, but then it's actually based on number of projects and size of projects as well. So there's kind of 3 different tables that we have to look at, and it gets very confusing. But it's based on if you've got X number of projects, so 50 projects, we do a certain number of days. If we've got 100 projects, we do more. But if those projects start to enter into mega project size, and we're talking super mega project size, those projects are kind of earmarked for additional audits as we go through, and it can be kind of right every 6 months we'll see that audit, that project, or every 12 months we see that project, depending on the size and depending on the risk. So it's a very different to quote, different to actually do the audits, and potentially harder for people to budget for and things like that as well, and plan for, because if the duration is based on projects but your number of projects fluctuates quite a lot, we have to, every year we have to kind of review it and make sure we've got the right number of duration audit days, if you like, for those. As much as possible, so if the company had 9,000 with BSI, we would try and align the audits together. So you might do kind of the initial audit for 99,001 separately, but as soon as you've got that, then we would try and align them, because there's an awful lot of crossover and it's quite difficult to purely just do 99 without covering bits of 9. So we tend to do those together. As I said, there's a trial going on next month of can we also combine 14 and 45? Probably less so, I would say, but as you've seen, there are kind of certain crossovers. The certificates would align as well. So whenever the 9,000 certificate expires, that's automatically when the 99,000 certificate expires, purely just because of that crossover between the two. You have to have all those requirements of 9 plus the 99,001's requirements as well. So without the 9, you've got a huge gap in what you should be covering. So the certificate dates align, the certificate scopes align as well. If you've got 9,001, 14,001, 45,001 and BIM, all with BSI, you can get a slight reduction because we know there is some crossover with those as well. The audits themselves set out slightly different, I suppose. A lot more formally we do. There's a set amount of time that we do the management system. There's a set amount of time we do, we call it a file review, but that's to make sure we cover kind of pre-construction activities and post-construction activities. So we're looking at the full life cycle of the project as well. And then it's very specific on how much time you should spend actually out on site as well. So we can still do some elements of it remote, but those signs absolutely have to be on site and, you know, sampling the risks of the scope as well.
If sorry, Chloe, just a quick one. So if your 9,001 certificate is at risk due to a major, then automatically then your 99,001 is at risk, correct?
Yes, yeah, it would be. Yeah. They're so tied together. I don't think you could ever say, oh no, you're fine for the other one, that's fine. But yeah, and in the same way really, that if you raised a major on 99,000, might have to consider, does that affect the 9 as well? Potentially less so, because it might be a really specific part of 99,000, but you would have to think, does this affect 9,000 in the same way that if you raise it for 9, it automatically affects 99,000? I haven't got that yet, so we'll see how that works.
Understood.
Recertifications would be done all together as well, so it's kind of very much sits alongside the 9,000. Yeah, there's no way you could kind of pull those apart and just do one or the other. Yeah. Okay, at the moment,
have we covered everything?
Okay? I think that is my very last slide. Apart from just any other further questions, and thank you very much for listening. Really.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Chloe. Again, I'm sorry I was late joining.
That's fine.
I did have a sort of an introductory thing. One thing to remind the members is that next week, similar time scale, we are having our AGM, and if anybody who's not already a committee member would like to join the committee, because we do have gaps, and just remind everybody then that as I say, it's the AGM next week, and look forward to seeing as many participants as possible. But once again, thank you very much. It was a lot to take in, I'm afraid.
It is quite a lot to take it. Yeah, it's quite a detailed standard.
I think you covered it well in the time available. I can see it being useful for the larger companies, but I don't know. I can't see many of the smaller companies going for 9001, so that will rule them out anyway.
Yeah, most of the interest we've had is from the larger ones, to be honest. So the sort of the
Yeah.
larger elements of the supply chain so far. But
If
I
anybody
I
else
think
any
as
comments?
time, no, I think as time goes by, maybe smaller companies start to integrate if becomes like an industry norm. As
Yeah,
Chloe
they might
said,
do, yeah.
it's early days yet, and you will get a feel on how many people will jump if you would like and join the approach. And then if it gets more standardized, I'm sure there will be a lot more cascade and
Mhm.
acceptance even from a smaller business. But
Yeah.
just want to say thank you for taking the time, and it was a great overview. I don't know if anyone else has any more questions.
David's got a question, I think.
Actually, no, I just wanted to actually say thank you.
That's
I
all.
actually work for a tier one construction company, and I can see the tier one and tier two companies particularly driving this. I agree with you. I don't think some of the smaller companies will use this particular document. So, but thank you. I found that interesting, and
Good.
I look forward to more information on this coming through in the coming months.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, and just feel free to get in touch if you need us. If you've got any questions or, you know, how does it work kind of things, then just give me a shout.
Yeah,
I find it
I think
interesting
David,
the direction that the standards are going, where we've got the 9000 and now we're building in the more sustainability and socio-economic requirements into the quality standard, not just the environmental standard. And
Yeah.
with it being industry specific, I expect to see more industry specific standards coming out along the same lines in future.
Yeah, there's one that's very, very recently come out. So it's ISO 70101, and that's 9,000, same sort of setup, 9,000 with extras for the healthcare industry as well. So it is a bit of a theme of making things as relevant as possible. See, more people get the benefit that way, I think. Yeah, more value in it.
just one final comment. The kind time that Chloe gave and all the clarity behind the standard has been recorded. So especially for Dave, who might have colleagues or anyone from yourselves, the recording can be found into the CQI website. So people who might miss the opportunity can go back and revisit that at a later time. Thank you.
Super. Thank you,
Yeah.
Marcus. All right.
Thank you very
Bye.
Take
much.
care. Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
good
you very
night.
much,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah,
Bye. Bye.
See
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks for listening.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.